Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. There we go. We're actually showing up now. Sorry if that was a little confusing, but for some reason the previous stream was not going through. But now it is, and here we are. So hopefully the sound is working. And yeah, so as you're probably aware, as you've probably seen from the blog and just about everywhere else, Dr. Seuss has been canceled. Now, people are pointing out that, well, you know, he was a lefty, he was a communist, etc., etc. And, you know, perhaps that's true. But for the most part, the books were relatively harmless. I mean, maybe they're a bit narcissistic, maybe they were a bit nonsensical. I don't think that they were necessarily going to stand the test of time in the way that the Tales and the Junior Classics do. But they were still a marker for mid-century white America. And of course, that's why they have to go. You know, same thing with Richard Scarry, same thing with all the blackwashing going on in all the movies and so forth. It's all about the destruction of a culture. You know, what we are seeing, what we've been seeing for the past 70 years now, really, is more like 60 years really, is a slow motion version of the harrowing of the Shire. You know, the orcs are breaking things because they hate the fact that they can't make it themselves, they can't do it themselves, they can't run it themselves. It's not white people who believe that whites are necessarily and always superior. There are very, very few actual white supremacists. And you know, most of them are of the fairly retarded sort. But almost all the white supremacists are people of color. They're the ones who make skin whitening cream a billion-dollar business around the world. They're the ones who believe more fervently than even the most left-wing SJW that the mere proximity to white people is going to make them smarter, make them more civilized, make them more capable, make them able to live a more civilized life. How is that the fault of your average Northern European? Yeah. And so the lie, of course, is based on equality. You know, I know a lot of you probably still on some level believe in equality, at least as an ideal. It's not. It never has been. If you want to find the lies, you need to look at your assumptions. You need to look at the things that you believe without even really realizing that you believe it or why you believe it. The lies are in the things that you take for granted, the things that it's never even occurred to you to question. You know, there's so much projection in the whole SJW neo-philosophy because they constantly assume their own inferiority by what their objectives are. Sometimes they should, sometimes they shouldn't. But either way, that's what leads you into falsehood, is clinging to those lies. How many good conservatives have you seen follow the lie of equality to the point that they're overtly rejecting the truth of the Bible? They're overtly rejecting the truth that can be found in the scientific method. They're overtly rejecting what they see with their own eyes simply because it violates their assumption of equality. And I've said this many times. There is no such thing as equality. One of the very few geniuses it's ever been my privilege to meet, Martin Van Creveld, wrote an entire book called Equality, the Impossible Quest. Not the worthwhile quest, not the noble quest, the impossible quest. Because there is no equality. There's no equality in the physical sense. There's no equality in the mental sense. There's no equality in the material sense. There's no equality in the monetary sense. And this is the particularly difficult one for Christians. There's no equality in the spiritual sense. And that's not just if you're a Calvinist. I'm not a Calvinist. But I don't believe in spiritual equality. God hates the wicked. God doesn't love everyone. Jesus said specifically that he came to separate people. He didn't come to unite them. There's not even equality in death. Exactly. If Jesus came to separate the wheat from the chaff, if he came to separate the goats from the sheep, if at the great white throne of judgment it's decided who goes to heaven, who goes to hell, etc., how can you claim to believe in equality in any way, shape, or form? How do you feel about the Founding Fathers' documents on equality? Cheap rhetoric. The Founding Fathers didn't believe in equality. It was cheap rhetoric. In the same document that Thomas Jefferson said all men are created equal, he went on to talk about our British brethren and the barbarian red savages. You have been misled and lied to and maleducated to believe that the Founding Fathers actually believed in any form of equality. Of course they didn't. Obviously they didn't. Otherwise, they wouldn't have felt any need to set up different states. They wouldn't have felt any need to make sure that power was divided. I mean, after all, if everyone's equal, why does New York need to have different representatives than Massachusetts? In fact, if everyone's equal, how come people in Britain, the British brethren, didn't get to vote? The whole concept doesn't make any sense. The very idea doesn't make any sense, and it's part and parcel of the attempted destruction of the American people. And that was a destruction that the American people themselves participated in because they wanted to make all the immigrants, the first wave and second wave immigrants, feel better about themselves. And then the third wave immigrants took it even farther. All the Emma Lazarus nonsense and the America is just an idea nonsense and so forth. Ben Franklin knew better. A number of the Founding Fathers knew better, and they knew it was going to be a problem. They just didn't realize how bad it was going to be. The purpose of the Founding Fathers' rhetoric was obviously to bring the diverse colonies together in order to provide sufficient strength to break free of Britain. You know, if you're going to try, I mean, think about it. The document is the Declaration of Independence. Of course it's rhetoric. The whole purpose is to inspire an uprising. Why? The purpose of the Declaration of Independence is no different than the purpose of the Communist Manifesto. It's no different than the purpose of those stupid manifestos that, you know, every group of more than 6 mal-educated, pot-smoking leftists put together to solve the problems of the world every time they happen to get into a room together. And so, and no, Ben Franklin wasn't wrong about not wanting Germans and Swedes in America, because Germans and Swedes in America never ever understood the British principles of the common law and limited government. And why would they? They never ever experienced it in their entire history. It doesn't matter. Actually, no, I don't agree that the Declaration of Independence is that much better written than the Communist Manifesto. They're both very well written. Both of them begin rather powerfully. You know, it's not about, I mean, the Declaration of Independence has the same flaws as the Communist Manifesto in some ways, because it doesn't really point at the truth. All men are not created equal. There is not a specter haunting Europe. You know, and so don't let yourself be deceived by your attachments. Don't allow yourself to be deceived by what you happen to be raised to think are the norms. You know, and it's not about being smart, and it's not about being educated. It's about the fact that you can't, you can't possibly know what you have accepted unthinkingly unless you happen to think about it at the right time. I was probably 30 before I understood that the crust was not and could not be the best part of the bread, the healthiest part of the bread. It's all the same. It's just cooked more because it's on the outside. You know, and does that mean that, oh, I was stupid not to question that? Of course not. I never thought about it for a second. See, and then but here General Grudge points us to, here's the excuses that you see. Well, I always took created equal to mean equal under the law. Yeah, I hear that kind of thing a lot. Well, Judeo-Christianity, I always took that to mean that, Christianity is based in part upon the Old Testament. No. Those are ex post facto lies that are created to cover, to try to cover it up once people begin to see through the falsehood. Oh, well, it doesn't actually mean what it said, what we're saying, because you figured out that that's false. What it really means is this other alternative explanation that it doesn't actually mean, but we're going to say it so that you'll still line up with our rhetoric. There's always excuses like that. In fact, anytime you see a set of stacked rhetorical explanations, that's a pretty good indication that there is a pretty big lie hiding underneath it. We might need to brush up. I'm not using any Latin at all. You know, I don't speak Latin. I don't even read it very well, and I certainly haven't mastered the grammar. Um, but uh, you know, the language of rhetoric is best understood. Oh, ex post fact. That just means after the fact. Um, they came up with the alternative explanation because people were beginning to see through the nonsense. So they come up with this alternative explanation that maybe you will accept to keep you within the narrative, you know, because you're still accepting equality as a virtue. You're still accepting equality as a goal. You're still a useful idiot. And that's why it's important to take the effort to try to see through your unquestioned assumptions. You know, and this is why, to get back to the or to tie this back to the original subject of the Dr. Seuss books and stuff. If you look at the way that people are influenced by their childhood input factors, it's very easy to see why children's books have always been a real focus. You know, there's that old saying that has been attributed to various folks, from everyone from Hitler to Napoleon to the founder of the Society of Jesus, Ignatius Loyola, I think his name is. And you know, if you give me a boy before the age of 7, I will show you the man. There's some truth to it, but it's not entirely true, of course. But we do carry over a lot of the assumptions from our formative years. We do, you know, in the same way that we bear the psychological scars of our childhood, and especially our teen years, our formative. That's why they call them your formative years. But see, here's this is the lie. I mean, even when you show people the total falsehood of it, they cling to their comfortable lies. Because it says, I still think in God's eyes, we are all created equal. No, we're not. Read the Bible. What do you think God means when he says some are vessels created for destruction? Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. You know? No, not even our souls. Our souls are who we are. You know, we're not our bodies. You know, our souls are, you know, we're not random electrical impulses that just happen to magically have become conscious. Our souls are who we are. And you know, the language actually reflects this in a lot of you know, Ronigan says some people separate being created equal with being equal. Sounds pretty dumb now that we're going over it. Yeah, but it's incredibly stupid to think that the crust is the best part of the bread when you start talking about it. But you know, they've just never questioned it sufficiently. They've never actually looked at their assumptions. Are they vessels that were created that way, or were they twisted through our experiences? Well, the Bible says very clearly that they were created for destruction. So if we're to take the Bible seriously, which as Christians we should, then we have to assume that some people are simply created wicked for destruction. Why? I don't know. I personally like the MMO theory of God. But, you know, we'll see. Wasn't the founder's point that commoners were equal to the nobles who were holding them down, denying God-given royalty? I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, that's, you know, that's what you'll see a lot of cuckish conservatives saying is that it's just about that, etc., etc. Meanwhile, then they'll, even though they say it's just about that, what they're really trying to do is they're just trying to salvage the concept. And you see it because you will never see somebody making those kind of points who isn't also going to be talking about how not racist they are, how they don't see color, blah, 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 blah. And so, and in fact, the Bible actually talks about how people will not be equal in heaven. Some people are closer to closer to God. Some people are closer to, or some people will have more crowns. The martyrs will be particularly honored, and so forth. Yeah, so the point is that, and also here's the easiest judge of any core concept. What are the consequences? Again, the Bible tells you, by their fruit you shall know them. What is the fruit of equality? What good has ever come from equality? You know, conservative morons are always going on about the Civil Rights Act and how things are so much better because of that. No, they're not. Literally everything about American society is worse post the Civil Rights Act. Now, it's not all from the Civil Rights Act. Of course not. But it was definitely a net negative. And it's not just a net negative for Americans. It's not just a net negative for white Americans or red Americans. It's a net negative for black Americans. You know, the fact that Jay-Z and Beyonce are willing to worship the devil and receive riches for a few years and live hedonistic lives in service to Satan does not mean that things are generally better for black people in America. And so, you know, the more that you look at the actual facts, the more that you know the history, the more you see through the lies. And this, of course, is precisely why they're constantly trying to create a year zero, free of history, free of knowledge, free of critical thought, where people are only capable of accepting that today they're at war with East Asia, and they've always been at war with East Asia. And so, you know, the more that you hear people, I mean, you know, for me, I think there was, I can't remember what it was. It was Hermann Goring who said something like, when I hear the word art or something like that, I reach for my gun. For me, it's the word unity. Only evil people talk about unity. They want to unify everything. They want to unify the nations. They want to unify the people. They want to unify the human race. Ein Reich, ein Volk. You know, I mean, how do you not see it? How do you not see it? You know that the Tower of Babel was bad. You know that, you know, the continental plan of Napoleon was bad. You know that Hitler's attempt to unify Europe under the Third Reich was bad. You know that the European Union is bad. Then why, when somebody comes to your church and starts talking about unity, do you not realize that they are speaking with forked tongues? Every time. You know, so Sam Harris says we are equal in the sense that none of us chose our birth childhood. That's not equality. That's like saying we are equal because we all breathe oxygen. No. Oxygen breathing is just a characteristic that we happen to have in common. Because, I mean, there's not any dog in the world that chooses its birth environment. Does that mean that we are equal to dogs? I mean, look, Sam Harris is a very, very bad wannabe philosopher. I've read all of his books that I'm aware of, and he's a very sloppy thinker, and he's philosophically incompetent. And so, you know, it's just totally absurd. I mean, you can't even, it doesn't even rise to the level of sophistry. But anyhow, you know, don't just learn to question those assumptions. And remember, SJWs and atheists and etc., they always project. That's why they say, you know, Christians never question what they believe. Christians never doubt anything. They just believe it all, you know, from birth. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, because you realize that they just haven't been around Christians or been in a Christian environment at all. I mean, you know, there's no recognition whatsoever of the fact that whereas it takes an atheist, you know, a year or two of college education and several Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris books to get to the point where they raise the question, can God make a rock so big he can't move it? I mean, I remember Christian kids having those discussions in 4th grade at church camp. You know, not with the adults around, just that just kind of came up. What's the best evidence beyond the Bible for Jesus' divinity? Well, I don't think that, I guess I would say that the reaction of evil to his name. It's really, really remarkable to see how out of their way the wicked in particular will go rather than even mention that name. What's the big divide between Islam and Christianity? The deity of Jesus. You know, you're talking about completely different gods. You know, I mean, if you want to know what the big, I'll give you a challenge. If you can read 2 books of the Quran, I suggest reading the cow for one of them. And then read 2 books of the New Testament, preferably the Gospels. And come back and tell me that you think that they are even similar, much less practically the same. I will be astonished. You know, Mike says that's very true. I must admit, I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in a creator or God. I find it odd how much Jesus is under attack. Precisely. If you want to find Jesus, look squarely at evil. Because what you'll find in your own life and in the world is a Jesus-sized hole. I know it sounds trite. I know it sounds glib. It's the sort of thing that I would have literally laughed at when I was a teenager. But I didn't understand evil then. I wasn't aware of what evil was, and I didn't recognize it in myself. But, you know, they say, you know, if you stare too long at the abyss stares back. I think what that actually means, and I'm not saying that Nietzsche intended it, I'm just saying that there is truth in it, is that that when you look at the abyss, you begin to see the shapes that move there. And then you begin to see how it reaches out to you, how it calls to you. And then you either try to use it, and that's what the wicked do. You fall into despair, drugs, nihilism, etc., you know, just out of fear. Or you run to the one thing that is capable of turning it back. And so Mike Cox says, so if Jesus comes back, the Jews will say, here he finally is, and Christians will say, he's back again? No, not at all. I don't think that you know, I don't think you understand that Jews are fundamentally at war with Jesus Christ. And, you know, if you read the New Testament, there's no question that it is regarded more or less correctly as wildly anti-Semitic. And that's because, you know, that's the literal opposition right there. No, you're right. Jews are still waiting for their Messiah, but the Messiah that they're going to welcome will be the one that's known as the Antichrist. And so, so how many religions have you studied? Well, I don't know exactly. I wouldn't say that I've studied them per se, but I'm quite familiar with Islam, Judaism. I'm more familiar with Hinduism than most. I'm pretty well read in Taoism, and because of my reading in Japanese literature and history, I'm probably much better, or I'm probably much more informed about the various Buddhisms especially of the Japanese variety. I'm much less familiar with Indian Buddhism or Chinese Buddhism, and I have to admit I find both Chinese and Roman ancestor worship interesting, but I don't know much about it. I don't really understand it. And then I know a fair amount about Mithraism, a little bit about some of the other classic pagan religions. And then, you know, a very, very little bit about the modern fake stuff, you know, the LARP stuff that passes for modern Satanism, modern Wotanism, or, you know, Nordic stuff. What's interesting about the Cathar heresy? The Cathar heresy is mostly interesting in that it's a good example of how all supposedly Christian cultism is inverted and satanic. You know, the whole concept of the perfecti, the perfected. The idea was, of course, that you could only become perfected by fully indulging in sin. Well, how is that any different than just being wicked? How is it any different than what the Prometheans today believe? You know, it's just absolutely nonsensical. And yes, I'm moderately familiar with Shinto. I actually find, some of my, from a, just from a personal perspective, I think that if I wasn't a Christian, I would probably be most drawn to the Japanese religions. You know, that, or just, you know, Roman Stoicism. Those are the things that just sort of philosophically speak to me much more than, you know, most of the other stuff. Study the top 3-4 religions in the world, and you find that you can't map all the religions together. You know, so I think that the more that you seek to understand, the more that you're going to find, the more that you're going to see. You know, it's yeah, but see here, I just want to find unity and peace. Well, you're not going to find it on this planet. You know, this planet is ruled by an immortal evil psychopath. So it's always a bit strange to me how, you know, people say, why do bad things happen? Why do the wicked prosper? It's like, well, it says right there in the Bible, you know. No, I do not believe that blacks are the true Israelites. That's not you know, I mean, maybe there is some lost tribe in Ethiopia, so that's about as far as it goes. All right, well, I actually need to roll because I'm going to be working on more Midnight's War tonight. The legend Chuck Dixon and I are cranking away on that, and so I think that but I think that at least I've given you plenty to ponder. So have a good evening. I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.